Welcome to the Psych Ward Podcast, where we have conversations with everyday people about men. We believe that every man has an authentic version of himself, so we're on a mission. And that mission is to find an answer to one question. What does it mean to be a man? Welcome back to the Psych Ward Podcast, where we have real conversations about men with men. I am Eric Ward, and with me, as always, is my much kinder but not as good-looking co-host, Mike Lucas. Michael, how's things?
I'll take it. Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm actually pretty excited about today's conversation. So
yeah, me too.
So, Mike, you and I both work in mental health, and between the two of us, I think we've probably got over 50 years of experience working with people who struggle with things like depression and anxiety. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today, men who end up in some form of treatment for a mental health issue. First, though, let's run through some statistics. All these numbers I got from a report that was published by the National Center for Healthcare Statistics, because we apparently needed another government agency. Right around 24% of Americans, male or female, have participated in some form of mental health treatment within the past 12 months. So basically 1 out of 4 Americans have gotten some kind of mental health help. About 12% of Americans have participated in therapy in the last 12 months. And interestingly, a higher number, about 18%, have taken medication for a mental health issue. What that means is there's a lot of people out there running around taking psych meds, but not doing the therapy work at the same time. Women are much more likely to participate in treatment. Around 28% of women have received some sort of mental health treatment, compared to only 15% of men in the last year. White adults are the most likely group to seek out treatment, 25% of us, in fact, compared to 15% of Black Americans, 12% for Hispanics, and 7% for Asian. And lastly, a statistic that we've all probably heard before, men are 4 times more likely than women to successfully commit suicide. So, Mike, a side question. Who decided that it was a good idea to start using the term successfully commit suicide? Seems like a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, bad choice.
Yeah, probably one I'll try and stay away from in the future. Anyway, joining us today is Mr. Paul Morton. I'm going to let him tell his own story, but what I do know is that he is a man who has dealt for many years with varying degrees of depression and anxiety. And for the sake of full disclosure, I know this because Paul has been an on-again, off-again client of mine over many of those years. Paul, we appreciate you coming on the show with us. You want to take a few minutes, tell us about yourself, who you are, what's your life situation, family, career, whatever you want to tell us.
Holy cannoli, what an introduction. And that's going to be a long time to get through it.
We got time.
But as Eric mentioned, I have been on again and off again with him for the entire time since noticing any sort of issue 20 years ago now.
Yeah,
maybe something like that. It's been a very long time, and I didn't really think that I would even feel any sort of way about it, but just hearing how long that's been, it's kind of, you could probably hear it in my voice, man, that's a long ass time.
It is.
I think it's always been there, but around 23, 24 is when I started to really notice it and decided I need a little bit of help. And thankfully there was an organization, because I wasn't working at the time, and organization helped me out and kept me going through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that I'm a success story now.
Very much so.
Yeah. I
Tell us about your
would.
life. What do you do?
I'm in sales. I sell shit, things people don't need. Widgets, whatevers, things with your name on it. We'll just leave it there. But yeah, okay. I'm able to take care of clients really well. I like to think I'm moderately successful at what I do, and I have been for many, many years. But the most successful part of it, beyond the mental health and the just business aspect of things, is successfully, loose term, raising a very interesting family, for sure. And I think that's my highlight. If we ran through the reel, I think that's where I would feel the most strong and the best. Because even though they are all individually pains in the ass, I love them all, and we somehow managed to get through it every single day, and damn, it feels good.
Working in mental health, we have a whole list of ethical standards we have to follow. And one of them talks about not having what's called dual relationships with clients. So, for example, if I have an attorney, I can't also be that person's counselor because we would have double relationship. And of course, the big part of that is we're not supposed to develop personal friendships or personal relationships with people. And if nothing else, I guess it keeps most therapists anyway from sleeping with their clients, which is great. That's always good for the therapeutic relationship. So it's a good standard to follow. But sometimes it just kind of sucks. And I'll tell you why. Paul, I've told people before over the years, many, many times, that you are one of those clients that I sometimes wish wasn't my client. Reason being, it's out of pure selfishness. I would love to just hang out on a patio with you and your family and throw some steaks on the grill and just hang out. One of the clients that I just love to talk to and listen to and watch you think and just who you are and how much you, like you said, you love your family and you're proud of them. And it's just very cool stuff. So stop coming to see me. And then in a couple of years, we can have some steaks.
I had a professor. She said, I have one rule for you, and that's don't sleep with your clients. She warned us, people are going to kind of get attached to you because of the counseling relationship. It's very intimate.
Yeah, it's that common. That's the scary part. Paul, I promise I will never sleep with you.
I appreciate that promise. And
you are welcome.
It's only been 20 years. We got a little time to go. So,
No, we're still feeling each other out.
You're hard to get.
Verbally feeling each other out. Let's get that. So here's one of my questions. You talked about many, many years ago, kind of identifying that you were struggling. So talk to us a little bit about kind of what you were experiencing, what you realized, what it felt like, and what was going on in your head.
I mean, that goes as far back as 10, 11, 12 years old, and just feeling that knot in your stomach anytime something wasn't right, feeling physically ill, feeling not right. And you got the young fat kid, you're going to have these weird self-esteem issues. So maybe it stems from that. Sure, whatever. I had fun though. I enjoyed myself. Nothing was brutal and terrible, but things just didn't feel right all the time. And, I'd bring it up to my parents. You take some Pepto. I think for a lot of families, right, that was kind of like, that was the move, like, you don't feel good, take some Pepto, whatever, put some ice on it, put a Band-Aid, whatever, it's fine.
I think I'll try that.
It wasn't fine, but I powered through and continued. And I think, learning all these years later about just different things, I'm 100% positive I was self-medicating then, drugs, alcohol, things like that through high school and beyond. And that, it turns out that's no good. That's not helpful in any way. And probably, definitely exacerbated that and made it way worse. So recognizing that kind of unsettling feeling just years ago and not really being able to do anything about it, not because my parents didn't love me. No, not at all. Not because they didn't care, but because what are you going to do? There wasn't talk like there is now. There wasn't information the way there is now. My mom worked at a mental health outpatient facility, and inpatient, she would check them in, but she saw the worst of the worst and not these more subtle things. She didn't see these things that manifest as a kid's tummy not feeling right. That kind of led its way into not feeling right in the head then, and just being sad a lot, being really down, and that, again, being medicated by drugs and alcohol turned to anger, turned not understanding those feelings, and it's kind of where it went from there. And when I decided to kind of take it into my own hands, that's when it got a hell of a lot better, but not before getting worse.
When my daughter was about 6, she woke me up from a dead sleep about 2, 3 in the morning, said, I don't feel good. And immediately I thought stomach. So I run her kind of to the bathroom. I'm like, just, if you're going to throw up, just throw up in the toilet, and I'm rubbing her back. She goes, it's not my stomach. She was having like an anxiety attack in the middle of the night. And I just assumed as a parent, well, when your child says, I don't feel good, you just think stomach or maybe a cold. But when you said take Pepto, it made me think of that. It's like an automatic response from a parent.
It really is, 100%.
Because I don't think I didn't expect her to have anxiety at that age. However, clients that I've worked with who have depression, they can remember far, far back feeling uneasy. And they really, like you, could not describe it. It's like an uneasy feeling, but when you're 6 years old, you don't know what that is.
Sometimes when you're 20 years old, you don't know what it is,
Yeah, true.
On our psychward.com website, we have a blog, and I just recently put a blog article on there, and it's like 5 ways to know that your body is telling you that you might be anxious. And it has nothing to do with our thoughts, our feelings. It's all of these kind of physical manifestations. Things like, having to pee all the time, and you're not drinking, and there's nothing medically wrong with you. But one of them is having to go to the bathroom all the time because of GI issues and feeling like you're going to throw up. And that's a really common physical manifestation of anxiety in people. It's just GI issues, not feeling good, and I think sometimes we could get into this whole long discussion about this, and we won't, but how closely tied our gut is to the rest of our body and to our health. And it's one of those things, I think, for kids especially, we don't listen to them when they start telling us that they don't feel good. We just think like, oh, you ate something, or you're nervous, or you have food poisoning.
Don't puke on me.
That's all I think all 3 of us are probably Gen Xers, and back then it was even more like, get out of my house. Like you said, take some Pepto and go back outside.
Made me sick.
Right. Get away from me. I got people to go see. So let's talk about it as you got older. You said you started with kind of drugs and alcohol and maybe different coping behaviors. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I don't know that I knew they were coping behaviors. I didn't know that they were self-medicating behaviors. I didn't know any of that. I thought I just enjoyed myself more and was more fun and less miserable when going to parties or going to a club or going to a bar or going to whatever opportunity arose. Typically it was going to be anywhere but home, anywhere that we could get away with whatever we wanted. And the freedom felt good. So that was, step one. But then when you get a little messed up, then that made it even better, And it wasn't until a long time later that I recognized that was definitely not the right move, because I think that likely caused just issues later on. So for years, I just didn't do anything. I just, stopped altogether. Any sort of substance, no dice. I think that went on for more than 5 years. And that was a really helpful time, like really, really helpful.
What kind of prompted you to stop all use of substances? Was there an event?
Yeah. I got really, really, really drunk and at a show of mine and just made a complete ass of myself after kind of like blacking out after getting off stage. And yeah, didn't want to ever go through that again.
What kind of show?
Rock and roll show. What other kind of show is there? No, actually, it was it was like a hip hop group that I was in. I played bass for, sang, played guitar, stuff like that. So
all right, so the two of you play instruments, and I'm feeling very non-musical. So,
but I don't anymore. It's so terrible.
My microphone, and you guys can talk. It's funny. So something I have never asked you, and I've never even asked, I don't think, any other client, oddly enough, but what was it like coming in the first time? What was it like walking into this strange building with somebody you don't know and sitting down and answering all these questions and talking about all that stuff you didn't want to talk about, or maybe did but hadn't up to that point?
That's a really damn good question, because it sucked. It was almost worse. I'd say that moment sitting in the office and filling out that, so you can hear it, like, I'm feeling this right now. Like, it was no fun. And not just no fun, but it was almost, I think some people would probably have a sense of relief, but instead I felt worse. It was like, shit, this is something that is devastating me right now, something that is devastating the people around me right now. It's just not good. And this makes it more real.
Yeah.
And so it hurt. It was scary. I still to this day don't like taking medication, and the idea of having to be on some sort of medication was also awful to me. But for the most part, it was just a really, really humbling and scary experience. And while I know it's completely necessary for myself and for millions of other people, I understand why people don't do it.
Yeah.
Because it sucks.
So I'm reading from an article in Psychology Today. Men associate seeking assistance for psychological or emotional problems with shame or weakness. Did you feel either one of those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I wouldn't correlate it to being a man. I would say just I failed. I failed at me. I failed me and at being me is the way I looked at it. And so if there was any sort of machismo behind it, maybe so, but more in I felt like I was failing.
Yeah, that's hard.
For me, there's a correlation. I've talked to some before about just some medical issues that I've struggled with over the years. And it's interesting because I know in my head that these medical issues are not my fault. I was born with autoimmune issues, and those autoimmune issues turned into a kidney disease, and that turned into a need for a transplant. And yet still, I remember before I had the transplant, I had to go get this long MRI. Like, I was in the machine for a couple hours. And I remember sitting in there and just wondering what I did wrong. Could I have prevented this? Should I have done something different? Should I have gone to a doctor earlier or more or something like that? And of course, utterly and completely ridiculous, because there is nothing that I could have done to affect the path that was going to take. And I think I hear some of that same stuff coming from you. Just wondering, like, where did I fail? And it's interesting because we know now, at least, that mental health issues are not about, a lack of moral fortitude or strength or whatever the case may be. We know what causes them. We know where anxiety and depression in particular come from. And yet people like you every day are looking in the mirror going, you're a failure.
That still happens, even all these years later. I mean, it still happens. There's bad days when there literally will be that mirror moment where you're like, you piece of shit, what are you doing? And they're thankfully so much fewer and further between now. But yeah, it's no damn fun. But the alternative is being no damn fun, but worse,
How do you beat the bad days? And maybe that's a bigger question. How do you, as you've walked through this journey of mental health, coming into counseling and even trying medications in the past and trying all of these other things that you've tried, how has that changed your approach to bad days, to anxiety, to depression? Because you're a very different person than the guy I met 20 years ago. I am too, but that just has more to do with my waistline than anything else. But I guess maybe try to walk us a little bit through your journey. You started, you came in, you came out, you came in, you came out, you tried different things. What's it been like for you?
Hard, but hopeful. And the medication I didn't want to take, I ended up being on it and got pretty much dialed in quickly and was on it for, I believe, 16 years. In March, I'll have been off for 4 years. So yeah, for a long time I was on that. So that was certainly helpful, but only because I was combining that with therapy and combining that with learning these tools, these tricks, these skills, these coping mechanisms, all these things that help make each of those bad days, make each of those episodes a little easier the next time. And even though sometimes they can still get brutal, I've had an opportunity to I feel like learn enough to where they're only brutal now. I think, sometimes they're gone in an hour, if that. And I think just learning, the biggest thing for me was learning how to walk away and kind of compartmentalize things. And that is extremely helpful. The pausing and walking away, just from whatever, just frustration, disagreement, problem, issue, whatever you want to call it, is, and I still have a hard time walking away because I like solving problems and figuring things out. But
so you're a guy.
Yes. But that's with interpersonal things. When it's just in my head, it's even still easier to just walk away from whatever I'm doing. Found that being physically active is a lot more helpful than sitting and stewing, not self-medicating, with any sort of alcohol, drugs, or anything like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's the summer. I will definitely enjoy. I might even have some rum tonight. I don't know, but though it might be 2 of them, And
so talking to us is going to make you drink?
No. I'm saying it's not self-medicating. It's not.
That's what I heard.
It's more like, hey, we might have one. I don't know. We're invited out later, so we'll see.
Nice.
Tell us about your venture of stopping the medication. How did that go?
That was a long process.
Yeah.
It was something that I wanted to do for a long time. I kept blaming the medication, although very, very helpful. And I'd like to think that it wouldn't have been possible to get to this point without it. Mm-hmm. But over those years, well, again, started as the fat kid, continued as, the funny fat guy, whatever, it just kept getting like fatter. I'm like, all right. So I'd talk to my primary. They'd be like, you definitely putting them on. So I'm like, all right, I need to get healthier and feel better, and I've really wanted to get off this medication for a long time because my mental health was pretty much in control, just, episodes here and there. So I worked with my psychiatrist to kind of wean me off over the course of, I think, almost a year and a half.
Wow.
So we tapered baby steps, and we check in every few months and taper down again, just very, very incremental small steps.
Yeah.
But when I was done, it was it felt good to know. And then especially like 6 months later, a year later, year and a half, like just to be like, I'm actually doing it, and it almost that failure and frustration and just devastation I felt that first day of filling out the paperwork that started that process. It was the opposite of that. And like, I was feeling elation again. I was feeling these heavy emotions, good and bad, but mostly good. And that's something that was another catalyst for getting off of it, is just to be able to feel those big emotions again, like in a real way.
That's great.
Which also might be why I cry at everything now. Everything. But I like it. I don't care.
You're comfortable with that now.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Love it.
That's great.
Went to my granddaughter's birthday party over last weekend, and they were watching a movie. My daughter rented the theater for her. And I sat there and I cried for an hour and a half because it was so great. It was so uplifting and awesome. Silly and awesome. front of all these little kids, my family. I didn't care. Doesn't bother me.
Good for them to see a man cry.
Absolutely. They should.
Yeah.
We do it.
Exactly.
I never cry. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Mike's the crier. He buys candles and cries. All right, not really. So, Paul, you and I have kind of a pattern over these 20 or so years, and that pattern changed recently. Typically, you would come in for a while when you were kind of struggling. We'd work on some stuff. You'd start doing better. And then I wouldn't hear from you not like you were ghosting me, but just you were done for a while. And then you'd do great. And then things would kind of start to go downhill and you'd be back, we'd be chatting again. This time you did something that I thought was really smart. You said, hey, you know what? I've done this so many times, right? And I'm doing well and I want to keep doing well. So what I'm going to do is just keep checking in once in a while. So you and I see each other on average about every 6 weeks or so.
Yeah, I think so.
And what's funny is like a lot of what we talk about is not therapy in the traditional sense. Again, and some of it has to do with, I think we just get along. We have very, very similar backgrounds and life situations and things like that. And so some of it's just chatting. But it always circles back to something that you're working on or you want to be working on. And I always feel like I've done my job with you if I've gotten you to stop for a minute and just think about something, if that makes sense. Like, And what I love is sometimes you'll come back the next time and be like, yeah, I thought about it, tried it, don't like it, you're wrong.
That's good though.
Cool. Let's move on to the next thing. Sometimes you come back and be like, yeah, that totally resonated with me and it worked and I'm good. So I don't know, Mike, do you have clients like that who will challenge you and do the work? And
I love it. I like that a lot, actually. And those clients tend to be more kind of philosophical. Their brain works that way. And I love that challenge. I love helping people that are deep thinkers, because some of the deep thinkers are some that suffer the most. There's research to back that up. People who are intelligent and think a lot about life and existential stuff really do have a lot of anxiety and depression. It's like they know too many things.
Do you think that's what it is for those people, just doing the reading, doing the thinking, like it kind of opens your eyes to everything that's potentially bad?
That can be part of it. Yeah. That's one of the reasons that they're anxious. As far as improving, I like when they challenge what we've talked about in previous sessions and come up with sort of their own version of what we talked about that works for them.
Yeah. I work with a lot of couples, and one of the exercises I will give them sometimes is it's this concept of an emotional savings account. Or a couple's savings account. And the philosophy behind it is kind of like, we have savings account at home, hopefully, where we have cash in reserve for when the furnace breaks or the house goes wrong. And if we don't have that, then when something goes wrong, we fail. It creates an emergency. We go into debt, whatever. For couples, I think this concept that you're going to have down periods in your relationship, and we need to be making regular deposits to the emotional savings account so that when one of those down periods happens, we've got some reserves to draw on. And that's a very intentional thing. It's kind of like when we have a savings account at home, it doesn't magically grow to $20,000. We have to be intentional about putting money in there every pay period, every week, whatever the case may be. So one time I gave this assignment. I'm like, hey, I want you guys to get a can or a box or something, and I want you to start writing down, same assignment I give most couples, writing down when your partner does something for you that is a deposit to the savings account. Well, little did I know that the guy was a woodworker, and he comes back in the following week, and he had apparently gone into his garage and made the most detailed replica out of wood of their entire house, right? It looked like, he showed me a picture of his house, and then he showed me this little wood bank that he had made. And of course, like, I was an amateur woodworker, so first of all, I'm feeling very inadequate because kind of skills. And I'm thinking like, well, aren't you just the overachiever? But what it was he had taken this project very literally, and said, hey, if we're going to do this, let's go all the way and let's, make this bank be something meaningful. And his thought was, well, if the deposits then can be more meaningful if we've made a bank that's meaningful as opposed to a glass jar. So those are the kind of people that I love working with, because they're like, hey, I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it, twist it, make it my own, run with it. And Paul, I've seen you do that so many times. Like, yeah, okay, I kind of like the concept that we've talked about, but let me turn it into something else that works.
Yeah, and I think the key there is they're not just spitting back the words that you've helped them learn.
Right.
They are taking that knowledge and applying it to their own life, and that's what you really want from therapy. I've had clients who can tell me what's wrong with them. They can use the right words, but they're not able to apply it.
Yeah. Does that come back to just people that want it versus people that are doing it?
I don't think it's that simple. I think there are at least from my perspective, there's a certain amount of clients who just love the session, but they don't seem that interested in making any change. And that's also kind of a challenge too, is at what point do you say, okay, you're not making really any changes. You've learned a lot because you can tell me what you've learned. So where do we go from there? Is it okay? And it's more of a philosophical question. Is it okay to have clients where you're their support system? They meet with you once every week or two. That is enough to keep them going in life. Some therapists argue that's a waste of money. That's a waste of our time.
I am one of those therapists. I like to see people that are, and I'm not saying every session, but in general, using therapy to make meaningful change. You think about couples again, in particular, and every couple comes to therapy for a different reason, but there's some similarities, right? Some of them are coming because they want to be able to check a box and say they tried therapy as they drove past on the way to the lawyer's office. Some of them want the therapist to tell their partner that they're wrong and they need to change. And a lot of other maybe less effective reasons that couples come to therapy. But then when they sit down and actually start doing the work, if they get to that point, I'll work with them as long as I need to work with them, as long as they're making meaningful change and doing the work. And if they're doing the work and failing, fine, right? Well, I need to find better ways to help communicate this to you and give you the tools. What I don't like is couples that come in and just want to argue every week. Or they, oh yeah, that's a great idea, we're going to try that. And then they don't. We didn't have any time. Make time. Right. So I'm a very different therapist than you are, Michael, like not surprising because we're different in a lot of ways, but I'm not the guy who wants to have you come in every week for 13 years and tell me about some fight you had with your sister-in-law. I don't care.
More like a weekly problem solving session, and the problem keeps changing. Some people are, less patient with that, and that's okay.
I do tell clients when they first start with me, like, if I'm not the right therapist, you can fire me at any time. And I may not be the right therapist for you. I'm not very touchy-feely. We're probably not going to hug. Just be okay with that.
For myself, I like an approach called reality therapy when I'm the patient or the client. I like my therapist to be blunt, to the point, almost a little rude sometimes, so that it can kind of shake me up a little bit. However, I'm not that kind of therapist. I like that therapy, but I'm not that at all.
Paul, what's therapy like with me?
Most of column blunt and what the hell are you doing? Have you considered trying this? And then I think you're a lot more compassionate than you give yourself credit for.
Yeah, I agree. He's that way as a friend too, or a coworker. He's blunt, to the point, shakes you up a little bit.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. A little, like I said, little column A, little column B, it rounds you out as a person.
Yeah, got to know what works for you. If that didn't work for you,
takes all kinds.
You'd probably not like working with them.
100%. Also, I like to see things through until the damn bitter end. And so, if there's awful things that happen, I'll make sure that I'm there for it. No, I just, it is another situation where the first dose worked. It seemed to work. And when something works, I want to continue with it and make sure that, it keeps working. So I was very, very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah.
Very, very fortunate. I told Eric a few years ago when I decided to come back around and just do the more check-in approach to things. I didn't want to bother him. I didn't feel like I had a need that was, time could better be used for someone that had a more urgent or more pressing need. And so I tried going online to the BetterHelp thing. It's like the website, and I'd never done anything like that. I was fortunate enough to not have to use internet dating or anything, and so I know from friends that have used it and use it now that it's brutal and a nightmare and awful, and that's what it felt like. It felt like I was, trying to be matched up with someone that was it was awful, and then thankfully. I got an email back from Eric after telling him about that, and I was able to get back in there. So the first dose worked. I stuck with it, and even when I tried to dip my toes elsewhere, it showed me I should just go back.
Yeah. With BetterHelp, you didn't like the idea of that they were trying to match you with somebody.
It's not that I didn't like that; it's that it was very difficult and felt disingenuous. It felt like you were. I guess I could equate it to those dating apps, right? Or the swipe right, swipe left shit. And where you might get matched with someone, but that's because it's somebody catfishing you from, Malaysia and really they just want your money or whatever. I don't know, but it just felt phony and I did not like it.
A lot of people try to get off their medication and it fails and they relapse. You've been off 4 years?
Yeah, it was 4 years in March, so a little bit more.
That's excellent. Did you have any moments where you're like, oh, God, I think I need to get back on?
Absolutely.
How did you get through those times?
Deep breaths and
all the stuff you learned from Eric.
No. Honestly, just knowing that even though it sucks, it sucks right now. And I think in the last case, it was probably well over a year ago where I think it lasted almost a full week, and it was brutal. It was no fun. I could not shake it, regardless of what I tried. And I think I went through the whole textbook, all my notes, everything I could try. I was throwing every bit of shit at the wall I could, and nothing was sticking. But the one thing that helped was knowing that it was temporary. It was something that I was going through. And even though it sucked really, really bad right now, it wasn't always going to be that way. And that's something I did learn from Eric is that it sucks right now.
That's a huge piece of it. Yeah. It's temporary.
And I've been able to relate that to a lot of the things that happen within the home, an uncomfortable situation, an issue with the kids, an issue sometimes very, very, very problematic. And the behavior is how they're being right now. And it doesn't always have to be that way. And it might seem that way today. It sometimes seems like it'll still be that way tomorrow and next year and the year after, but it's right now and it can get better. So
that's great.
I struggle with that sometimes in my marriage. I think when we have one of those arguments, or we don't really fight. Like, we're not screamers. We don't yell at each other. We don't call each other names. We never have. But you have one of those really, really unpleasant disagreements where everybody just kind of goes silent. And there's no real talking happening for a while. In my head, I know that that's only going to last 2-3 days at the most. And then we're both going to set aside our pride and we're going to sit down and finish the conversation and do what we need to do. But when it starts, it feels horrible. I don't like being in a household where my wife and I don't feel comfortable and don't feel like we can talk to each other because we're so upset about something. And my, part of it is, like I said earlier, being a guy, my inclination is to I'm going to come up with a solution to this. And sometimes, it's that DBT principle, right? That learning to be okay when nothing's okay, or maybe being okay with it not being okay is a better way to say it. And I have to practice that, and it's so hard for me. And Paul, I know over the years I've heard you talk about that so many times, like having to just sit and be with it and accept it and do what you can do to minimize it, but ride it out.
Yeah, it's rough. I'm really grateful that when it comes to those argument type things with my wife, that it isn't 2 or 3 days. So those are usually resolved pretty quickly. They're not blow ups. They're not crazy. They're simple. What causes them a lot of times is the issues in the rest of the home with the rest of my roommates, also known as my children and grandchildren. There's that hope. There's always going to be that hope that it's going to get better, that they're going to make the choices down the road to get them to that better.
Yeah.
And so while I might not have it, that super uncomfortable stuff with my wife, I mean, sure, of course, there's sometimes that suck, but whatever. That's everybody. We're fortunate enough to be able to handle that together and well. But when it happens with the kids stuff, just having to sit in it, whoo, man, that's a stinky bathroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm fortunate, and I've thought about this before, that those kinds of situations with my wife happen every couple of years, maybe. This is not a common thing. And I think about, someone like you who, has to sit with that stuff, with an anxiety and a depression issue on top of it, and just sit in it. And, I've talked before, I work in the mental health field, obviously, and I'm an advocate for mental health, but I sometimes feel like I'm a little bit of a missionary for the clients themselves. And by that, I mean, I find myself constantly having conversations with people that go something like, you don't know what strength is until you have to battle your way through this, right? My wife sees that she's a cancer nurse, right? And she sees it on the physical end, right? Battling your way through cancer and sometimes not making it through, but still fighting, being strong. And it's one of the things that's always impressed me. And Paul, you've been a little bit of I guess maybe a missionary for mental health. I've heard you talk over the years about telling lots and lots of people, like, you just need to go see somebody. Just suck it up, buttercup, go do it.
Well, absolutely. I have no problem telling people if asked or if brought up, I'm not going to go out and let it, I'm a vegan bumper sticker on my car. I'm not that guy, but if it comes up, yes, absolutely. I take part in therapy. I encourage people to go visit someone to talk things out. I encourage someone to get their mental health checked out, do a diagnostic screening with an actual mental health professional or psychiatrist, and, not just like a TikTok quiz or something. I don't recommend that, but yeah.
Neither do we, for the record.
I have no problem. I don't feel like it's ever taken away a man card. I never feel like it's made me less of a person in any way, to let people know that I'm in it and I've struggled, and that it helps immensely if you want it. And that's just people I know, but even within my own home, like I encourage, the kids. And in fact, I mean, the older ones have had struggles of their own. I think one of the coolest things my youngest did was she decided she wasn't enjoying things as much as she thought she should, and was having a little bit of trouble. And she asked if we could find her someone. And I couldn't believe it. I got a 13-year-old saying, like, hey, I'd like to seek out some help because I'm not feeling the best I can. And I was like, of all the things to be proud of, I was really, really damn proud of that.
Yeah.
Just being able to have that maturity to recognize that you aren't feeling the way you think you should feel, and to seek out treatment. I thought that was pretty awesome.
That's amazing. And I'm sure felt a little bit of pride.
100%.
You sort of laid the groundwork for that.
Well, not necessarily though. Because it's, although it's talked about in the home, like, being okay and knowing when to seek help and things. I mean, it wasn't something that I was doing on a consistent basis myself.
Yeah. Did she know though?
Then probably not, just because she was a little, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows everything usually in the house going on.
They're intuitive.
She knows that I was on medication for years, and then when I got off and stuff like that, to help.
She was aware that there's help for this sort of thing.
Right. But it wasn't she didn't know that I was still active in therapy at that point. But yeah, she knew she didn't feel right. So she knew to tell a trusted adult. So that's what she did.
Paul, why do you think most men struggle with asking for help when it comes to mental health?
Perception of weakness, maybe. You don't want to be perceived as not being tough enough to handle something, and maybe, or they don't want to feel like that failure that I did. They don't want to feel like they screwed it all up, because to admit you're wrong is one of the hardest things to do, especially when it has to do with how you've been running your whole damn life, how you've been living, how you've been acting and thinking and all that. You're admitting you're wrong. And I think for anyone, but especially for a dude, that's tough. That's really tough to say, I screwed this up really bad. I was wrong and I need help is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So it has to be a pride and just maybe even a weird type of self-esteem thing, because you don't want to feel shitty that other people might perceive you that way.
Right. One of my toughest moments in my adult life was walking in the front door of a building with my wife to go see a marriage counselor. And knowing and having to sit in that office, and the therapist looks at you and, they go through all of the rigmarole of confidentiality and this is how it works and blah, blah, blah. And then it's, so why are you here? And having to sit there next to my wife and look at this counselor who, the irony was, like, I had way more experience, way more credentials, way more everything than she did. And of course, I tried to use that as an excuse in my brain not to go, but I shut that off. And sitting there and looking at her and having to explain to her how badly I had screwed up and didn't know how to fix it. And it's kind of what you're describing, right? That helplessness, I think, that is part of it. That for me as a man in my marriage, I'm the leader in my household. I'm right. And to have to say, like, I broke this and I'm not 100% sure how to fix it. That didn't feel good. And I think that's true for a lot of the men that I see, particularly in couples, whether they broke it or they both broke it or the wife broke it, whatever the case may be. But I that resonates with me, what you're talking about, having to sit there and fill out those paperwork and start writing down the words and then sitting in an office with a stranger and saying them. I can relate. It's a challenge.
It's a tear. I'm telling you, that's when you asked about the very start of this. It literally just takes me back, and I, even though I feel good emotions now and I feel great, it's an overwhelming feeling. And I think that's where that part comes from, because it might not be sad anymore, but at one point it really was. Yeah. And so it's still really overwhelming, that, like you said, that helplessness. And as men, I don't think it's not that we aren't supposed to feel it, but when you do feel it, it's uglier than anything, because you just want to help, especially when it comes to your family. You want to provide, you want to be there for them. You want to make sure that they're okay at all times. And when you're not okay yourself, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah. One of our earlier episodes, we talked about how boys are raised to be confident, and girls are not.
Should be.
They should be. But I think culturally, we've traditionally raised girls to be kind of demure and, to step to the background. And thankfully that's changing. But I think when we grow up, being confident and I can do whatever I want to do and do whatever I need to do, and I'll figure it out. I always have. And then we run into this brick wall of something that we can't figure out. And there's no answers, right? I think that's the challenge. Paul, what else do you want us to know? If somebody's listening to this, because I think there's like 3.5 people that listen to these every time we pull. All right, maybe a few more.
I know more than that personally.
But if somebody's listening to this and maybe they're boyfriend or husband or somebody they know is struggling. And I'm not asking for a commercial here. But I think for you as the end user, so to speak, what do you want people to know?
That it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot, but it's going to hurt a lot more if you don't just stop for a second and face that helplessness and face that wrongness, that fail, whatever that feeling is that got you to the point where you're even considering getting help, even though it's going to hurt. It's going to get way, way better if you try. And even though that's like our house tagline, right? Try. That's all I ever want out of anyone in anything they do is to just try. I think for anyone that hears this, just know if you just try, no matter how much it sucks, if you try, it can get better. It definitely can. As long as you try.
That's exactly what you did.
It is. And I try every day. I still have to try all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. But it's a lot easier now. Lots easier.
Mike, I kind of feel like we should just shut up and end it there. I'm
good with that. That'll be the end.
All right. So, Paul, you probably don't know this, but we usually end every episode asking Mike for his takeaways. So give it to us. What do you got?
Thank you, Paul. This was really great. It's great that you have the courage to kind of come on here and pave the way for other men to talk about their mental health issues. It's weird because I read that article. I read part of it earlier in this episode. And the takeaway from this article that the author has is men need to just stop complaining, stop avoiding it, get help when you need it. Where is the strength in avoiding getting the help that you need? It's time to step up and be manly. I didn't know your story. It's just weird that I read that article today and you came on here and said basically the same thing as this article. So where's the strength when you avoid the problems you're having? You use substances to get through it rather than seeking help. And I think you did a great job of making that point tonight.
Paul, were you using substances to get through it or to run away from it?
Run away. I would say run away. Because it wasn't so much as getting through it. I mean, I feel like they're going to be happening anyway, so I might as well enjoy running through it.
Yeah.
Or running away.
Yeah.
So Paul, I also want to thank you. It was kind of an awkward idea to, hey, I'm going to invite one of my clients on here to talk about what we talk about. And
I love awkward. I'm cool with it.
I know. but here I am like, confidentiality. Paul, I'm never going to tell anybody I've ever even met you. And then I put you on a podcast. So
hey, that's all right. I dig it.
I know. It's all good. So I just want to
informed consent.
That's right. Informed consent for medical treatment. I just want to say thank you. You know this already, but I've enjoyed knowing you and working with you. And I especially enjoy conversations like this, just listening to you talk and be real. I think you have a level of genuineness about you that all of us can probably strive for. So it's one of the things I love about talking to you and just spending time with you is just listening to you be you and decide to be okay with that. So even on the days where it hurts and it sucks. So thank you.
Oh yeah. Thank you guys.
Michael?
Yes, sir.
Are we done?
We're done. Until next time.
Until next time. I feel like we should do a commercial or something. All right, sir. Gentlemen, both of you, thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate your time.
So long, fellas. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.